Today's video is all about the grandmother of the Juneteenth celebration, Miss Opal Lee, the 97-year-old Texan known for her push to make Juneteenth a national holiday, was given the keys to her new home, which was built on the same tree-lined corner lot in Fort Worth that her family was driven from by a racist mob when she was 12 years old. This woman had lived through the Great Depression, World War II, and the Civil War. It is not every day you meet a living legend. Hell, it's not every year, decade, or lifetime that you get a chance to meet someone like Miss Opal Lee. But today, we're talking about her and her visit to Japan. And this is from June 14, 2004, Miss Bay McNeil, the writer. And so she's celebrating Juneteenth in Tokyo rather than instead of walking from Fort Worth to Dallas, which she does on an annual basis to celebrate Juneteenth. And we'll talk about Juneteenth in just a minute. But last month, the 97-year-old Dr. Lee and her team made their way to Japan on a 10-day tour that included various talks, a fireside chat at the American Embassy, and a Let's Talk About It event put on by the Legacy Foundation Japan. That's where the writer had met her. On May 3rd, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Joe Biden, the highest honor for a civilian in the United States, for her decades of activism. It was not the first time the Texan had met the president. However, in 2021, Biden at last signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law, and he was joined by Vice President Kamala Harris. Also, several key lawmakers and Lee, the grandmother of Juneteenth herself. Over the course of decades, she has made her mission to see that this day came, said the president of Lee's resolve. But before we go any further, like our president, I had never even heard of Juneteenth until some time ago, well into my adulthood also. And on June 19th, it commemorates the arrival of the news in Texas that the President Abraham Lincoln had finally signed the Emancipation Proclamation to go into effect on January 1st, 1863. That act was essentially supposed to put an end to slavery in the United States. But as we know, it did not. While slavery, the most sinister of institutions, had to be fully dismantled, there were holdouts and enforcement came late to some places, particularly Texas, the farthest state from Washington, D.C. and the last Confederate slave territory. Juneteenth commemorates the arrival of Galveston of Union troops from the North and marks symbolically the end of slavery, which that process would not fully be abolished until the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which took effect in December of 1865. And then it still lasted well after that. But we won't talk about that any longer. Anyway, Juneteenth was celebrated by the Black community in the decades that followed emancipation. It became less common during the era of segregation and so-called Jim Crow laws. Young Black activists and scholars began to champion its broader return in the 2000s. And I was actually introduced to it, this is Mrs. McNeil, on a TV show, episode 9, first season of Atlanta, which aired October 25th, 2016. All that time, though, Lee had been campaigning to make Juneteenth an officially recognized holiday through a series of 2.5-mile walks representing the 2.5 years it took for Emancipation Proclamation to be enforced in Texas. She conducted a symbolic walk at 89 in the same year that Atlanta episode aired, and 5 years later, her efforts were rewarded. Now, I'd like to take time right now to say, while other nationalities have their ancestors memorialized on mountaintops in Washington, D.C., and we have them in the likes of statues and things all over the United States. What's our problem with Miss Opal Lee? What's our problem with our nationality having some kind of rewards and some kind of declaration for their activities? Now she's here in Tokyo. A good crowd gathered at the Legacy Lounge in Minato Ward for Lee's visit in May. As she walked up to the front of the room, they gave her a standing ovation. She was accompanied by her granddaughter, Diane Sims, the CEO of United Unlimited, the company that organizes the annual Opal Lee Juneteenth celebration in Fort Worth, Texas. The big news was that the Legacy Foundation Japan plans to hold its own Opal Walk for Freedom starting from 10 a.m. at a May Plaza in Chiyoda Ward, wherever that is in China. Juneteenth was the only holiday I knew absolutely nothing about until after George Floyd's death, said Legacy Foundation Japan's executive director, Latanya Whitaker. People all over the world felt the pain of his death, and the black community in Japan was no different. But many people feel that since we are in Japan, it doesn't affect us. It does. Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to say we are here too, and we stand with our community, no matter where we may be in the world. The day after the Let's Talk About It event, I had a chance to chat with Lee and Sims. So how do you begin a conversation with an icon such as Opal Lee? You just simply ask her what she thinks of Japan. Her response was, "Japan has been treating me fabulously," she said, smiling ear to ear. "You'd think I was somebody special. The Japanese have been so nice to me, I'm considering staying." I told her I had the exact impression 20 years ago and stayed. The three of us, Lee, Sims, and I, shared a hearty laugh. I think the Japanese hospitality beats Southern hospitality any day. On the topic of Japan, I wondered why C and Sims were bringing a message of freedom and unity to these shores. We as a people need to understand that Juneteenth means freedom for everyone, not just black people, not just Texans, everybody. And we're not free yet, so I keep telling us we should make ourselves into a committee of one to change somebody's mind. It can be done. It's just going to happen one day. But people have been taught to hate, and they need to be taught to love. And that reminds me of a song called "It's a Thin Line Between Love and Hate." We're supposed to be hating the ones that actually perpetrated oppression against us, but usually we hate the ones that we're supposed to be loving, and we love the ones we may supposed to be hating. That's the trick. Sims added that one of her goals, United Unlimited, is aiming to elevate Juneteenth and the concept of freedom for everyone. When I say Frigidaire, she said, you think refrigeration. When I say Xerox, you think about a copy. So the term Juneteenth needs to be synonymous with freedom. So, as you have it, this is Miss Opal Lee in Japan, and she is one of our icons, and we need to remember her and her commitment to our community. We want people that are unaware to know that Juneteenth is about freedom, because we haven't arrived yet, Lee said. As we wrapped up our chat, we have to continue to talk about it and walk about it until we get there.